A man knocked on my door at 9 in the morning claiming I owed Capital One Bank $73,000 for a credit card I'd never applied for. And when I told him there must be a mistake, he showed me loan documents with my signature on them. My name is Helen. I'm 72 years old, and that knock on the door revealed that my son had been systematically stealing my identity for 6 years, forging my signature on loans, credit cards, and lines of credit, destroying my financial life while I trusted him completely to help manage my affairs after my husband died. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand who I was before all this happened, before my son turned me into a victim of identity theft and financial abuse. My name is Helen Marie Carpenter, born Helen Marie Foster in 1951 in Canton, Ohio. I grew up in a middle-class family. My father worked at Timken Steel Company. My mother was a homemaker. I was the second of 4 children, 2 brothers and a sister, and we had a normal, happy childhood in the 1950s and 60s. I married my husband, Donald Carpenter, in June of 1972 when I was 21 and he was 23. Donald worked as an accountant for a manufacturing company, and I worked as an elementary school teacher. We were both college educated, both careful with money, both planning for a secure future together. We bought our first house in 1974, a modest 3-bedroom ranch in North Canton for $32,000. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Our son, Christopher, was born in October 1975. He was our only child, not by choice exactly, but after a difficult pregnancy and delivery with Christopher, my doctor advised against having more children due to complications. So Christopher became everything to us, our whole world. All our parental love and hope and dreams focused on this one child. Christopher was a good baby, an easy toddler, a bright elementary school student. He tested into the gifted program in 3rd grade, got straight as through middle school, played soccer and baseball, had friends. Donald and I were proud of him, proud of the young man he was becoming. We gave him everything we could afford, a good education, nice clothes, family vacations to places like Washington, D.C. and Niagara Falls. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable, and we wanted Christopher to have opportunities we hadn't had. High school was where things started to change. Christopher was still smart, still capable, but he became less interested in academics and more interested in social status. He wanted designer clothes, expensive shoes, the latest electronics. Everyone has this, he'd say when asking for money. I'm the only one without an iPhone, or all my friends have these sneakers. Donald and I tried to teach him the value of money, tried to make him earn things by doing chores or getting a part-time job. But Christopher resisted. He didn't want to work at McDonald's or mow lawns like other kids. That was beneath him, he said. He wanted the lifestyle without the effort. He got his first credit card at 18, a student card with a $500 limit. Within 3 months, he'd maxed it out and couldn't make the payments. Donald and I paid it off and made him cut up the card. You're not ready for credit, Donald told him. You need to learn to live within your means. Christopher went to college at Kent State University in 1993, majoring in business administration. We paid his tuition, about $8,000 a year back then, plus room and board. We wanted him to graduate debt-free, to start his adult life without the burden of student loans. It was a sacrifice for us. We cut back on our own expenses, delayed retirement contributions, but we thought it was worth it for our son's future. But Christopher didn't appreciate the sacrifice. He partied through college, barely maintaining a C average, spent money on alcohol and entertainment instead of books and studying. He got another credit card sophomore year, hid it from us, maxed it out to the tune of $3,000. We only found out when a collections agency called our house looking for him. Donald was furious. We're paying for your education, your housing, your food, and you're running up credit card debt partying? What's wrong with you? I'm in college, Dad. Everyone parties. Everyone has credit card debt. It's normal. It's not normal to be irresponsible with money. We're not paying this off. You figure it out. Christopher eventually settled the debt for less than he owed, ruining his credit in the process, but Donald held firm. No more bailouts. Christopher needed to learn consequences. He graduated in 1997, barely, and moved back home with us while looking for a job. The job search took longer than expected because Christopher wanted a high-paying position with minimal effort. He turned down several entry-level jobs that would have been good starting points because they didn't pay enough or weren't what he studied for. He finally got hired as a sales associate at a car dealership in 1998, making about $30,000 a year with commission. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. He moved into an apartment, a one-bedroom in Akron, and for a while, things seemed stable. Donald and I were still working. I was teaching 5th grade at a local elementary school, making about $42,000 a year. Donald was now a senior accountant at his firm, making about $65,000. We were in our late 40s, thinking about retirement, contributing to our 401k accounts, paying extra on our mortgage to have it paid off before we stopped working. In 2001, Christopher met a woman named Angela. They got married in 2003, a wedding we helped pay for to the tune of $15,000. We liked Angela. She seemed grounded, practical, a good influence on Christopher. They had a daughter, our granddaughter Emma, in 2004, and a son, our grandson Tyler, in 2006. We were thrilled to be grandparents, visited as often as allowed, babysat whenever asked, bought gifts for the kids constantly. But Christopher's financial problems continued. He went through several jobs between 2003 and 2008, always getting fired or quitting because of personality conflicts or unrealistic expectations. Angela worked as a dental hygienist, making decent money, probably around $45,000 a year, and she seemed to be the stable one in the relationship. In 2008, Christopher called us in a panic. "Dad, we're going to lose the house. We can't make the mortgage payment. Can you help us?" Donald and I talked about it. We'd already helped Christopher so much over the years, but we couldn't let our grandchildren be homeless. We lent him $12,000 to catch up on his mortgage payments, with the agreement that he'd pay us back at $200 a month. He made 3 payments and then stopped, claiming he couldn't afford it. The financial crisis of 2008 to 2009 was hard on everyone. Donald's company did layoffs, and while he survived them, his hours were cut and his salary frozen. My school district implemented budget cuts, no raises for teachers. We tightened our belts, cut back on everything, worried about our retirement. In 2010, Donald had a heart attack. He was 58 years old, too young for something like this, but stress, diet, genetics, all contributed. He survived, had a stent placed, was put on medications. But the heart attack was a wake-up call. We needed to think seriously about our future, our health, our finances. Donald's company offered him an early retirement package in 2011. He was 59, not quite ready to retire, but the package was generous, about a year's salary as severance plus full pension benefits starting at age 62. He took it, thinking he'd find consulting work or a part-time position to bridge the gap until his pension kicked in. But consulting work was hard to find. Companies wanted younger, cheaper workers. Donald did a few small jobs here and there, but nothing consistent. We lived on my teacher's salary, about $48,000 a year by then, plus the small amounts Donald brought in. It was tight, but we managed. Our house was almost paid off, just 2 years left on the mortgage. We had about $230,000 in combined 401k and IRA accounts. If we were careful, we could make it work. In 2013, Donald had another heart attack, this one more severe. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks, had bypass surgery, was weak and fragile when he came home. The medical bills were staggering, even with Medicare and our supplemental insurance. We paid about $32,000 out of pocket for his care. Christopher was attentive during Donald's illness, visiting the hospital daily, calling to check on his father, offering to help in any way he could. "Mom, you shouldn't have to deal with all this alone," he said. "Let me help you with the paperwork, the bills, the insurance claims. You have enough to worry about taking care of Dad." I was grateful. Dealing with insurance companies and medical bills while nursing Donald back to health was overwhelming. Christopher took over the paperwork, organized everything, filed the claims. It was a huge help. Donald recovered slowly, but he was never quite the same after the second heart attack. He tired easily, couldn't do the things he used to do. He spent his days reading, watching TV, working on small projects around the house. He turned 62 in 2015 and started collecting his pension, about $2,800 a month. Combined with my salary and later my Social Security, we had enough to live on, though not extravagantly. Christopher continued to help with our paperwork. Mom, you and Dad should focus on enjoying your time together, he said. Let me handle the boring administrative stuff. I'm good at it. And he was, or seemed to be. Bills got paid on time. Insurance claims were filed properly. Donald's medications were ordered and delivered. Christopher set up automatic payments for our utilities, our insurance, our property taxes. This way you don't have to worry about remembering due dates, he explained. I appreciated his help. I was busy teaching and taking care of Donald. Having Christopher handle the financial paperwork gave me one less thing to stress about. He'd come over once a week, usually on Sundays, and we'd go through any mail that needed attention. Just sign here, Mom, he'd say, pointing to signature lines on forms. This is for Dad's prescription refill. Or this is for your supplemental Medicare plan renewal. Or this is for the property tax appeal we discussed. I trusted him. He was my son. Why wouldn't I trust him? I signed whatever he put in front of me, barely reading it, because he'd explain what it was and I believed him. I retired from teaching in 2016 at age 65. My pension was about $2,200 a month, and I started collecting Social Security, another $1,400 a month. With Donald's pension and Social Security, we had a combined income of about $7,200 a month. Our house was paid off as of 2013. Our cars were paid off. We had no debt. We should have been comfortable. But money always seemed tight. I didn't understand why. Our expenses shouldn't have been more than about $5,000 a month for everything. Property taxes, utilities, insurance, food, gas, medications, and miscellaneous expenses. That should have left us with over $2,000 a month to save or spend on extras. But somehow we were always just scraping by. We're spending too much on groceries, Donald would say. We need to cut back. We're not spending that much, I'd argue. Maybe it's the medical expenses. Your medications are expensive. We try to economize, but it never seemed to make a difference. I chalked it up to inflation, to living on a fixed income, to the general expense of being alive. I didn't suspect anything was wrong. In 2017, Donald's health declined further. He had a minor stroke in June, and while he recovered most of his function, he became more confused, more forgetful. His doctor diagnosed him with early-stage vascular dementia, likely caused by his heart problems and the stroke. It was mild at first, just little things like forgetting names or losing track of conversations. But it was scary, watching my husband of 45 years start to slip away mentally. Christopher stepped up even more. Mom, you can't handle this alone. Let me take over all the financial stuff completely. I'll set up a power of attorney so I can make decisions about Dad's medical care if needed, and I'll manage all the bills and paperwork. You just focus on Dad's day-to-day care. It made sense. I was overwhelmed. Donald needed constant attention, help with medications, help remembering things. Adding financial management to my responsibilities seemed like too much. So I agreed. Christopher brought over legal documents for me to sign, papers he said established power of attorney for medical and financial decisions. This way, if Dad has another stroke and can't communicate, I can make decisions, he explained. And this way, I can pay bills directly from your accounts without having to ask you to sign checks all the time. I signed the documents. I didn't read them carefully. I should have, but I didn't. I trusted my son. I trusted that he was helping me, not hurting me. Over the next 2 years, 2017 to 2019, Christopher handled everything. He paid all our bills, managed our accounts, dealt with insurance and Medicare. I rarely saw bank statements or credit card bills anymore. Everything's online now, Mom, Christopher said. I've gone paperless to reduce clutter. You can check it anytime you want, but I'm monitoring everything. I didn't check. I didn't know how to access online banking, and I trusted that Christopher was handling it properly. Donald certainly wasn't checking anything. His dementia was progressing, and by 2018 he could barely manage basic daily tasks without help. In early 2019, Donald's condition worsened significantly. He had another stroke in March, this one more severe. He spent 3 weeks in the hospital and then moved to a rehabilitation facility for another month. The medical bills were mounting again, probably another $40,000 in out-of-pocket expenses. "Don't worry, Mom," Christopher said. "I'm working with the insurance company to get everything covered. We might need to set up a payment plan for the portions they don't cover, but I'll handle it." I was grateful. I was exhausted, visiting Donald every day in the hospital and then in rehab, watching him struggle through physical therapy, seeing him get weaker instead of stronger. I couldn't have dealt with the financial side of things, too. Donald came home from rehab in late April, but he wasn't the man I'd married. He was confused most of the time, didn't recognize people sometimes, needed help with everything from dressing to eating to using the bathroom. I became his full-time caregiver, and it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. We hired a home health aide to come 3 days a week for a few hours to give me a break. Christopher said he'd found someone affordable through his insurance connections. The aide, a woman named Rosa, was wonderful, patient, and kind with Donald. Christopher said she cost $800 a month, and he paid her directly from our account. In November 2019, Donald passed away. It wasn't unexpected. The dementia and the heart problems had taken such a toll, but I was devastated anyway. We'd been married for 47 years. He was my partner, my best friend, the father of my child. Even though he hadn't been fully himself for the last few years, I'd loved him until the end. The funeral cost $14,000. Christopher handled all the arrangements, said he'd take care of the payment using life insurance proceeds. Donald had a $50,000 life insurance policy through his old employer, and the money came to me as the beneficiary. Except I never saw that money. Christopher said he deposited it in our account and used it to pay off medical bills, funeral costs, and other debts that had accumulated during Donald's illness. "You're all squared away now, Mom," he said. "No debt, clean slate. You can start fresh." I should have asked for documentation, should have verified what he was saying. But I was grieving, overwhelmed, barely functioning. I trusted that Christopher was taking care of everything properly. After Donald died, I was alone in the house for the first time in my adult life. It was lonely, quiet, sad. Christopher and Angela came by often at first, bringing the grandkids, staying for dinner. Christopher continued to handle my finances. "Don't worry about anything, Mom," he'd say. "I've got it all under control. You just rest and grieve." The house felt too big without Donald. Christopher started suggesting I should downsize. "Mom, this house is a lot for you to maintain by yourself. The yard, the upkeep, the cleaning. You should think about selling it and moving to a nice apartment or a senior living community." "This is my home," I said. "I raised you here. I'm not ready to leave." "I get it, but think about it practically. The house is worth about $180,000 in the current market. You could sell it, bank the money, move somewhere with no maintenance responsibilities. You'd be more comfortable." I refused. I wasn't ready to leave the home I'd lived in for 45 years. Besides, Donald and I had worked so hard to pay off that mortgage. The house was mine, free and clear. Why would I give that up? Christopher dropped the subject, but he kept bringing it up every few months. "Have you reconsidered selling the house? Are you sure you want to stay there alone? What about a reverse mortgage if you don't want to sell?" In early 2020, the pandemic hit. Everything shut down. I was isolated in my house, unable to see my grandchildren, unable to go anywhere. Christopher did my grocery shopping, delivered it to my door with minimal contact. "We don't want you getting sick, Mom," he said. "Stay home, stay safe." It was a lonely time. I spent months barely seeing anyone except Christopher when he dropped off groceries. He continued to handle my finances remotely. "I'm checking your accounts regularly, making sure everything's okay," he'd say during our phone calls. The pandemic continued through 2020 and into 2021. I got vaccinated as soon as I was eligible in early 2021, and by summer, I was starting to see people again. Christopher, Angela, and the kids visited more often. Life was slowly returning to normal. In fall 2021, I decided I wanted to start traveling a little. Maybe visit my sister in Florida, who I hadn't seen in 2 years because of the pandemic. I called Christopher to ask about my finances. Do I have enough saved to take a trip? Maybe fly to Florida, stay with Linda for a week. Let me check the accounts, Christopher said. I'll get back to you. He called back the next day. Mom, money's a little tight right now. Your accounts are lower than I expected. I think all those medical bills from Dad's last year really depleted things. Maybe wait a few months, let your pension and Social Security rebuild the savings. How much do I have in savings? I asked. About $8,000. You don't want to spend too much of that on a trip. $8,000? I'd had over $200,000 in retirement accounts before Donald's illness. Even after medical expenses and the funeral, there should have been more than $8,000 left. But I thought maybe I was misremembering. Maybe the medical costs had been higher than I realized. In January 2022, I got a letter in the mail, one that Christopher hadn't intercepted. It was from a company called Synchrony Financial, thanking me for my recent payment on my account ending in 4782 and noting that my current balance was $61,300. I stared at that letter for a long time. I didn't have an account with Synchrony Financial. I'd never heard of them. And I certainly didn't owe $61,000 to anyone. I called the number on the letter. The customer service representative asked for my Social Security number and my account details. I gave her my Social Security number and the account number from the letter. Yes, Mrs. Carpenter, she said. This is a personal line of credit you opened in May of 2018. Your credit limit is $75,000 and your current balance is $61,312. Your minimum monthly payment of $850 is due on the 23rd. I didn't open this account, I said. I've never heard of Synchrony Financial. Ma'am, I'm showing that you opened the account online in May 2018. There have been regular draws on the credit line and regular payments made. Are you saying you didn't authorize this? No, I didn't. This is identity theft. I understand, ma'am. Let me transfer you to our fraud department. I spent 2 hours on the phone with the fraud department. They walked me through the account history. The account had been opened using my name, my Social Security number, and my address. The application included scanned copies of my driver's license and what appeared to be my signature. There had been dozens of draws on the credit line over 4 years, totaling $74,000. Payments had been made sporadically, enough to keep the account from going into default, but not enough to pay down the balance significantly. Mrs. Carpenter, if this is fraud, you'll need to file a police report and send us documentation, the fraud investigator said. But I have to tell you, this looks like authorized activity. The signature matches your driver's license. The payments have been made from a bank account we have on file as belonging to you, and there's been no previous indication of fraud. What bank account? She gave me an account number at First National Bank. It was my checking account, the one Christopher had been managing for me. My hand started shaking. Christopher had opened this account in my name. Christopher had been drawing money from it. Christopher had been making payments from my checking account. I need copies of everything, I told the investigator. Every statement, every draw, every payment. Send it to me by mail. I can email it to you if you prefer. No, mail. Send it by mail to this address. I gave her my address. Not the one Christopher might intercept, but my actual physical address, and I told her to mark it confidential. It will take about a week, she said. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table, trying to process what I just learned. $61,000. Christopher had somehow taken out $61,000 in my name without my knowledge or consent. But how? I'd signed something. They said my signature was on the application. When had I signed it? What had Christopher told me I was signing? I started going through my filing cabinet, looking for any financial documents. Most of the files were old, from before Christopher took over. There was very little recent paperwork because Christopher had said everything was online now, paperless. I found my checkbook, something I hadn't looked at in months. The last check I'd written myself was in mid-2017. After that, all the entries were in Christopher's handwriting, recording automatic payments and transfers. I looked at the balance. According to the checkbook register, I should have had about $12,000 in my checking account. I called the bank. My checking account had $400 in it. Can you tell me where the money went? I asked the bank representative. I'm showing regular automatic payments to various creditors over the past several years. Would you like me to read through them? Yes. She read through a list of payments. Synchrony Financial, $850 monthly. Capital One Bank, $1,200 monthly. Discover Card, $700 monthly. Wells Fargo Personal Loan, $950 monthly. Chase Bank, $1,000 monthly. $3,700 a month going out to creditors I'd never heard of. No wonder money had been tight. No wonder I never had anything left over. Christopher had been taking out loans and credit cards in my name and using my pension and Social Security to make the minimum payments. I need copies of all statements for the past 5 years, I said, and I need them mailed to me. We can email them. Mail them. I need physical copies. Over the next 2 weeks, documents arrived. Piles and piles of documents. Statements from Synchrony Financial, Capital One, Discover, Wells Fargo, Chase, and 3 other creditors I hadn't even known about yet. I spread everything out on my dining room table and started going through it all, piece by piece, building a timeline of Christopher's theft. The first credit card was opened in May 2017, shortly after Christopher had taken over my finances. It was a Discover card with a $15,000 limit. The application had been done online, but it required a scanned copy of my driver's license and my signature. I remembered that. Christopher had said he needed to scan my license for some insurance paperwork. Over the next year, Christopher had opened 7 more credit cards and 3 personal loans, all in my name. The total credit he'd accessed was over $190,000. He'd drawn most of it down. The current balances, adding up everything, totaled $173,000. $173,000 that I supposedly owed. That was destroying my credit. That was eating up my monthly income and minimum payments. I felt sick. I felt betrayed. I felt stupid for trusting him, for signing things without reading them, for letting him take over my financial life. But I also felt angry. Christopher had stolen from me. He'd forged my signature, opened accounts in my name, and used my good credit and my retirement funds to finance God knows what. And he'd done it while pretending to help me, while acting like the dutiful son taking care of his elderly mother. I needed to find out exactly how much damage he'd done. I pulled my credit report from all 3 bureaus, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. My credit score was 480. 480. Before Donald got sick, my credit score had been over 760. The credit reports showed even more accounts I hadn't known about. Christopher had opened a home equity line of credit on my house for $50,000 and drawn $42,000 from it. He'd opened store credit cards at Best Buy, Lowe's, and Macy's, running up thousands in charges. He'd even opened a car loan in my name for a vehicle I'd never seen. Total debt in my name, $184,000. My retirement accounts were gone, drained to make payments on these fraudulent debts. My checking account was nearly empty. My savings account had $3,000 left out of the $25,000 that should have been there. My house, which had been paid off, now had a $42,000 lien against it. Christopher had financially destroyed me while I'd been grieving my husband and trusting my son to help me. I needed proof that I hadn't authorized any of this. I got copies of all the original applications for the credit cards and loans. On each one, there was a signature that looked like mine but wasn't quite right. Christopher had traced my signature or practiced copying it, but there were subtle differences. The H in Helen was slightly different. The loop on the P in Carpenter wasn't quite the same. I found an old document with my real signature from before 2017, a property tax statement I'd signed myself. I compared the signatures side by side. They were similar, but not identical. An expert would be able to tell they weren't the same person's handwriting. I also found something else interesting in the loan documents. Several of them had email addresses listed, a Gmail account that wasn't mine. I looked up the email address online and found it was connected to a phone number. I reverse searched the phone number and found it was a cell phone in Christopher's name. Christopher had been using his own email and phone number on some of the applications, not mine. That was sloppy. That was proof that he'd been the one opening these accounts, not me. I gathered all my evidence, all the statements, all the applications with the forged signatures, all the documents showing that Christopher had controlled my finances. I made copies of everything, stored the originals in a safe deposit box at the bank, and prepared to confront him. But first, I needed to report this to the police. This was fraud. This was identity theft. This was financial exploitation of an elderly person. These were crimes. I went to the Canton Police Department and asked to speak to someone about elder fraud. They connected me with a detective named Sarah Martinez, who specialized in financial crimes against seniors. Detective Martinez listened to my story, looked at all my documentation, and nodded grimly. Mrs. Carpenter, this is one of the clearer cases of identity theft and elder financial abuse I've seen. Your son committed multiple felonies: identity theft, forgery, fraud, theft. With the amount of money involved, some of these charges could carry significant prison time. What do I do? I asked. First, we file a police report. Then you need to contact all the creditors and explain this is fraud. You'll need to file fraud affidavits with each one. You'll need to freeze your credit, so no new accounts can be opened. And you'll need to consider pressing criminal charges against your son. He's my son, I said, my voice breaking. But he destroyed my life. He stole everything from me. I understand this is difficult, Detective Martinez said gently. But he committed crimes. Serious crimes. And if you don't hold him accountable, he'll likely do this again, either to you or to someone else. We filed the police report. Detective Martinez said she'd open an investigation, would contact Christopher for questioning, would gather evidence for the district attorney. Next, I started the process of disputing all the fraudulent accounts. Each creditor had its own process, requiring police reports, notarized affidavits, copies of identification. It took weeks to contact everyone, to explain the situation, to send in the paperwork. Some creditors were understanding. Synchrony Financial, once they saw the police report and the evidence that Christopher had used his own email address on the application, agreed to close the account and remove it from my credit report. I wouldn't be liable for the $61,000. Others were more difficult. Capital One insisted that I was responsible for the debt until proven otherwise. They required a full investigation, which could take months. In the meantime, they expected payments. I hired a lawyer, a man named Robert Chun, who specialized in elder law and identity theft cases. He was expensive, $300 an hour, but I didn't have a choice. I needed help navigating this nightmare. Robert filed lawsuits against the creditors who wouldn't immediately remove the fraudulent debt from my accounts. He also sent a cease and desist letter to Christopher, demanding that he stop all contact with me and that he return any money he'd stolen. I didn't warn Christopher that I knew what he'd done. I wanted him to be caught off guard when the police came knocking. Detective Martinez interviewed Christopher in late March 2022. I wasn't there, but she told me about it afterward. At first, Christopher denied everything. I don't know what you're talking about. I've been helping my mother with her finances. I haven't stolen anything. Mr. Carpenter, we have documentation showing that you opened multiple credit cards, loans, and lines of credit in your mother's name without her authorization. We have loan applications with email addresses and phone numbers that belong to you, not her. We have handwriting experts who've examined the signatures on these applications and determined their forgeries. We have your mother's testimony that she never authorized any of this. Christopher changed his story. She did authorize it. She signed everything. She knew what she was signing. She's old. She's confused. She doesn't remember. Mr. Carpenter, your mother is 71 years old and fully competent. She's passed cognitive assessments. She's not confused. You committed fraud. She gave me power of attorney. I was acting under that authority. Power of attorney doesn't give you the right to open credit cards and loans for your own benefit. That's not managing someone's finances. That's stealing from them. According to Detective Martinez, Christopher eventually broke down and admitted what he'd done. He'd been in financial trouble for years, struggling with his own debts, and he'd seen my good credit and my assets as a solution. He'd thought he could borrow money in my name, use it to pay off his debts, and then pay it back before I noticed. But he'd never been able to pay it back. The debts had spiraled, and he'd kept taking more and more, always thinking the next loan would be the one that solved his problems. "Why didn't you just ask me for help?" I said when Detective Martinez told me this. If he'd explained he was in trouble, I might have been able to loan him some money or help him find a solution. People who commit financial fraud often feel too ashamed to ask for help, Detective Martinez explained. They convince themselves they're borrowing, not stealing. They tell themselves they'll pay it back and no one will ever know. But it never works out that way. The investigation took months. The district attorney reviewed all the evidence and decided to file charges against Christopher in August 2022. He was charged with 10 counts of identity theft, 5 counts of forgery, 3 counts of fraud, and 1 count of exploitation of an elderly person. The combined charges carried a potential sentence of up to 40 years in prison. Christopher's arrest was devastating for our family. His wife, Angela, claimed she didn't know what he'd been doing, that he'd kept their finances separate from mine, and she'd never seen any evidence of the fraud. I believed her. Angela had always been honest, and she seemed genuinely shocked when the police arrested Christopher. My grandchildren were confused and hurt. Emma was 17, Tyler was 15. They knew their father had been arrested, but didn't fully understand why. "Grandma, did Dad really steal from you?" Emma asked me, tears in her eyes. "Yes, honey, he did. I'm sorry you have to deal with this. But why? We're not rich, but we're not poor either. Why would he need to steal?" I didn't have a good answer. Christopher had been making about $55,000 a year in his sales job. Angela made about $60,000 as a dental hygienist. Combined, they should have been comfortable. But Christopher had always wanted more. Always wanted the lifestyle he couldn't afford. I found out later that he'd been spending the stolen money on maintaining appearances, a leased BMW, designer clothes, expensive dinners at high-end restaurants, a country club membership. He'd been living far above his means, and when his own credit cards maxed out, he'd turned to mine. The trial was scheduled for February 2023. Christopher's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but I wouldn't agree to anything that didn't include significant prison time and full restitution. He'd stolen $184,000 from me. He'd destroyed my credit. He'd put my home at risk with the equity line. He'd left me financially devastated at age 71. I wanted justice. The trial lasted 3 days. The prosecution presented all the evidence, the forged signatures, the email addresses, the phone numbers, the timeline of fraud. They showed that Christopher had systematically stolen from me over 5 years, that he'd abused his power of attorney, that he'd taken advantage of my grief and my trust after Donald died. Christopher's defense was weak. His lawyer tried to argue that I'd known about the accounts, that I'd given verbal permission even if the signatures were forged. But the evidence was overwhelming. Expert handwriting analysts testified that the signatures weren't mine. Bank representatives testified that Christopher had been the one making the draws and payments. Detective Martinez testified about Christopher's confession during the interview. I testified too. I sat on the witness stand and told the jury about trusting my son, about letting him manage my finances, because I was overwhelmed caring for my dying husband. I told them about finding the letter from Synchrony Financial, about discovering the mountain of debt, about realizing that the son I'd raised and loved had been stealing from me for years. "He betrayed me," I said, my voice shaking. "He betrayed my trust as his mother. He stole my financial security. He destroyed my credit. He put my home at risk. And he did it all while pretending to help me, while acting like a caring son. That's not love. That's cruelty." The jury deliberated for 4 hours and found Christopher guilty on all counts. At sentencing in April 2023, the judge was harsh. "Mr. Carpenter, you committed egregious crimes against your own mother. You exploited her grief, her trust, and her vulnerability. You stole from her systematically over 5 years, accumulating $184,000 in fraudulent debt. You forged her signature multiple times. You lied to police initially about your actions. This court finds your behavior reprehensible. Christopher was sentenced to 12 years in prison. He was also ordered to pay full restitution of $184,000, though the judge acknowledged that might never happen given Christopher's lack of assets. Angela filed for divorce while Christopher was awaiting sentencing. She said she couldn't stay married to someone who'd committed such horrible crimes against his own mother. I respected her for that. She and I maintained a relationship, and I still see my grandchildren regularly. They're not responsible for their father's crimes. The financial recovery was slow and painful. Most of the creditors, once presented with the criminal conviction and the evidence of fraud, agreed to remove the debts from my credit report. But some fought me, required additional documentation, dragged the process out for months. My credit score, which had been 480, is now back up to 640. It's not where it was, but it's improving. I can get credit cards again, though I'm terrified to use them. The home equity line was discharged as fraudulent debt, and the lien on my house was removed. My home is mine again, free and clear. But I never recovered most of the money Christopher stole. The creditors forgave the debts, but that doesn't mean I got the money back. It's gone, spent on Christopher's BMW lease, his country club membership, his designer clothes. $184,000, my entire life savings and Donald's life insurance money, just gone. I live on my pension and Social Security now, about $3,600 a month. My house is paid off, so my expenses are manageable, but I have no savings, no emergency fund, no cushion. If something major breaks in the house, if I have a medical emergency, I don't know how I'll pay for it. I'm 72 years old, and I should be enjoying retirement. I should be traveling, seeing my grandchildren grow up, living comfortably on the nest egg Donald, and I worked so hard to build. Instead, I'm living paycheck to paycheck, terrified of every unexpected expense, trying to rebuild financially at an age when I should be relaxing. The emotional damage is even worse than the financial damage. I trusted my son. I loved him. I thought he was helping me. The betrayal is so deep, so complete, that I don't know if I'll ever recover from it. I have nightmares about signing documents, about Christopher standing over me saying, "Just sign here, Mom," about realizing too late what I've done. I have panic attacks when bills arrive in the mail. I obsessively check my credit report every week, terrified that somehow new fraudulent accounts will appear. I haven't visited Christopher in prison. He's written me letters, apologizing, claiming he's changed, begging for forgiveness. I've read them, but I haven't responded. What would I say? That I forgive him? I don't. I don't forgive him for destroying my financial security. I don't forgive him for betraying my trust. I don't forgive him for stealing from me while I was grieving his father. The letters are full of excuses. He had a gambling problem, he says now. He was addicted to the rush of buying nice things. He was trying to provide for his family. He was ashamed to ask for help. He was planning to pay it all back. Excuses. All excuses. He made choices. Deliberate, calculated choices to forge my signature, to open accounts in my name, to steal my money. Those weren't accidents. Those weren't mistakes. Those were crimes. Angela brings the kids to visit me sometimes. Emma is 20 now, in college studying to be a teacher, like I was. Tyler is 18, just graduated high school, planning to join the military. They're good kids, and I love them. But it's hard to see them without thinking about what their father did to me. "Grandma, do you hate Dad?" Tyler asked me last Christmas. No, I said honestly. I don't hate him, but I don't trust him, and I'm not sure I can ever forgive him. He says he's sorry. He says he's learned his lesson. I'm sure he is sorry, but sorry doesn't give me back the $184,000 he stole. Sorry doesn't give me back my sense of security. Sorry doesn't undo 5 years of fraud and betrayal. Tyler was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry he did that to you, Grandma. You didn't deserve it." "No, I didn't. But neither did you and Emma. You lost your father to his own greed and stupidity. That's not fair either." I tell my story now whenever I can, at senior centers, at community groups, anywhere people will listen. Elder financial abuse is an epidemic. Adult children steal from their parents all the time. taking advantage of trust, confusion, and the natural desire to believe the best about our children. The warning signs were there, if I'd known to look for them. Christopher's constant financial problems, his eagerness to take over my finances, the paperwork he had me sign without letting me read it carefully, the fact that I never saw bank statements anymore, the money that was always tight despite having no debt and a decent income. I should have been more careful. I should have read what I was signing. I should have monitored my own accounts. I should have questioned Christopher when things didn't add up. But I also shouldn't have needed to protect myself from my own son. That's what hurts the most. I raised him. I loved him. I helped him when he was in trouble. And he repaid me by destroying my financial life. Other seniors have told me similar stories after hearing mine. Sons who stole their mother's Social Security checks. Daughters who convinced their fathers to sign over property and then kicked them out. Grandchildren who maxed out their grandparents' credit cards. It's shockingly common, this betrayal of elderly people by their own family members. The solution, I've learned, is to never give anyone complete control over your finances, even family. Keep your own access to your accounts. Review statements regularly. Read everything you sign. If someone pressures you to sign quickly, that's a red flag. If someone says, just trust me, instead of explaining what a document says, that's a red flag. If someone insists on going paperless so you never see physical statements, that's a red flag. Christopher is scheduled for release in 2035. He'll be 60 years old. I'll be 84 if I'm still alive. I don't know what relationship we'll have, if any. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive him. I don't know if he'll ever truly understand the depth of what he did to me. What I do know is that I survived. I lost everything financially, but I survived. I'm living in my home, seeing my grandchildren, rebuilding my life. It's not the retirement I planned, not the golden years I dreamed of, but it's mine, and no one can take it from me again. I've learned to check my credit report obsessively. I've learned to say no when people pressure me to sign things. I've learned that trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired. I've learned that blood relation doesn't guarantee loyalty or honesty. Most importantly, I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought. At 72 years old, facing financial ruin and emotional devastation, I could have given up. I could have let Christopher destroy me completely. Instead, I fought back. I gathered evidence. I filed police reports. I testified in court. I sent my own son to prison for his crimes against me. That's not something I ever imagined doing. When I was a young mother, holding baby Christopher, dreaming about his future, I never imagined that one day I'd be sitting in a courtroom watching him be sentenced to 12 years in prison for stealing from me. But life takes unexpected turns. People disappoint us. Those we trust most sometimes betray us worst. And when that happens, we have a choice. Collapse under the weight of that betrayal or stand up and fight for justice. I chose to fight. And I won. Christopher is in prison. The fraudulent debts are gone from my credit report. My house is secure. I'm rebuilding, slowly but surely. The financial damage may never be fully repaired. I'll never get back the $184,000 Christopher stole. I'll probably live the rest of my life with less security than I should have had. But I have my dignity. I have my self-respect. I have the knowledge that I didn't let him get away with it. I'm 72 years old. I've been widowed, financially destroyed, and betrayed by my only child. But I'm still here. I'm still standing. I'm still fighting. And that's worth something.